Welcome back, everyone. In this upcoming video section, we are going to type the remainder of the components inside of our Crwn-Clothing project. To begin with, we need to include the types for some of our libraries, the most important one being style components. So just like we did with Redux Logger, we are going to yarn add at types/styled components. So as this is installing, we're going to come over and we're going to first start styling out our button component. So to begin with, I want you to convert both the component.jsx and the styles.jsx over to the TSX versions. What you'll notice inside of our styles component is that most of these components that get generated from style components actually already are typed for us. So here you'll notice that this base button is of a style component type button, and then there are some subsequent parameters on the style component. For us, we can just trust the inference. It's rare that we need to modify these. So what we can do is just trust that the styling that has been done on these components is correct. When we come to our button component.tsx, we need to think about the logic around how we've created our code. So first off, these button classes are no longer going to be a const because as we saw, we want these to be constant values that move around. So we're going to convert this to an enum as we did with our action types. And we're going to similarly switch these colons over to equals. And then if we save this, we also need to now check why there are. Oh, no, that was just the compiler being a little slow. So again, as I mentioned, depending on the speed of your computer, the compiler on VS Code might lag a little bit behind. So if you ever see something where it doesn't look accurate, just wait a little bit or restart VS Code. Unfortunately, Typescript compiler is pretty intense on the system. It's just one of those things that lags behind. Now here inside, get button. Let's think about what this does. This will definitely return us back one of these three style component buttons. So what we can say is that this function gives back type of base button because base button is a component. Now type of gives us the actual type on the base button. So it will give us this style component button type, which all three of these buttons are. They are all variations of style component button because they're all based off of the base button. The additional parameter that we need to also do is that we need to think about how this button component is actually going to render. So as you can tell, we need to define button props. Now, if you want to define props inside of our component, as we've done before, one main way that we did inside of our monsters Rolodex was that we defined the type of the props like so. And inside, we would add any additional props that were not typical to our component. However, we know that we have children inside of these props, and we don't actually want to define the children ourselves. This is something that React is already attached. So chances are when you look at something, and this is not your own implementation, but something that the underlying library or third-party library does for you, chances are there's something in the types that does this for you. So for us, we are using functional components. We can import in the FC type, which stands for functional component, from React. This FC type is going to be what this button is. So we can actually say FC, and then we can pass it the button props as the generic. What this will do is it's equivalent to actually passing the button props onto this section as we were used to doing before. So you could essentially do button props like this, or if you use the FC type, it will actually infer the children, which is really handy for us. So as you can see now, this children is valid because React knows that it's a React node because this button is of the functional component type, which extends children as part of its props definition. What we do need to add is button type is loading, but also the fact that all of the other props that we might spread through onto custom button here, this is going to be part of just a button. Remember, we are extending on the base type of style component.button, which is just a React button. So we want all of those button props as part of the signature that we accept as props on this component. So we'll first define the props that we have unique to our button, which is really just this button type that derives which of these button styles you want, and then is loading, which determines to show the spinner or the children. So first off, we'll say that button type, which is an optional parameter because by default, the button type fallback is base button, as we can see here. So we can say that button type is one of these button type classes inside of the enum. Next, what we need is loading. Is loading is also optional. And here we can say that this is a Boolean value. From here now, we need to extend the other props that exist on a button. In order for us to get those, we actually need to import in button HTML attributes because React has specific attribute bindings for their button component. And this is called button HTML attributes. And then what we can do is use an intersection type right here, and we'll say button HTML attributes for the HTML button element. And now our button is able to accept all of those other parameters that we are familiar with, such as the actual type, because we have button type, but remember there is a type attribute that you can use if you want to say that it's a submit button, or if it's just a regular button, or if it's another type of button. These are the ways that you can get all of those typical button attributes. So now we have typed out this button, and we can save this, and we can now move on to the remainder of our components. Now, typing buttons and typing inputs typically are the most challenging because these custom components do extend upon the existing components that are present inside of the React ecosystem. Really, our buttons just add on to some existing component. For us, this is the button component. We're just customizing it, adding some additional functionality. So you need to figure out which attribute you need from those original ones in order to extend upon them. We saw this inside of our monsters Rolodex when we did with the form input. So this is an important thing to remember. If you are writing a component that extends upon an existing React component in HTML, there is most likely a corresponding component HTML attributes type that you want to pass a similar HTML element for. And from there, you can now extend all of those existing bindings that exist of those attributes. Now, speaking of form input, that's the next component that we're going to type out. So join me in the next video where we'll type it together. I'll see you there.